No, I have no idea how heavy that is. Hey, welcome back to the garage, everyone. All right, this is the next video in our series on finding resonant drivetrain vibrations in our old Coupe DeVille. And our search has led us to the differential, and this is what we're going to tackle next. We're going to start off by disconnecting the drive shaft, and we'll just tie that up so we don't have to remove it from the transmission. We'll remove the drive axles from either side, and then we will remove the pinion housing, and we'll disassemble the interior of the differential itself. And along the way, hopefully, we'll figure out what's causing our driveline vibrations. All right, the first thing we're going to do is take the rear axles out of this car. I've got the wheels and the brake drums off already. I've got 4 retaining nuts here on the back side of the axle flange. And these holes right here, that's what you use to get at that. So here we go. All right, pardon the fuzzy nature of the display on the last scene. Had some grease on the camera there. So, okay, did both sides, got the nuts off the flange there. And you're supposed to use a slide hammer to pull this axle out. But I think we can just do it that way. Whoopsie. Oh, I'm making a mess. Oh well, I guess I'll just make a mess. There we go. There we go. Yeah, boy, let me get something shoved in that hole. The rear wheel bearings on these old Cadillacs, they're just lubricated with the gear oil from the differential. There's no grease on them. Another item that you might want to pay attention to on these axles is that the race here is stuck up in there, and it goes around the axle. It goes around the bearings there. So if they separate, that's not an issue at all. According to the factory service manual, if they separate, that's just fine. We can just leave it like this and reinsert it when we're done. And these bearings are new, by the way, so well, new-ish. I just changed them out a few years ago, but you know, there's hardly any miles on them. So anyway, so if your race separates from the roller bearings, don't worry about it. It's normal behavior. So I'm going to go ahead and remove the other axle off camera, and I'll be right back. All right, so go ahead and put a nut back on this one of these studs here. It'll just keep the brake system from falling off. Or better yet, let's just put 2 on there. How about that? All right, up next we're going to remove the differential carrier nose bumper arm. Say that 10 times real fast. That sounds like Rick's blowing leaves again. Well, this thing's on here tight. There we go. It's been soaking with some good old PB Blaster. Probably never been off the car. Differential carrier nose bumper arm. Who came up with that? These are 5/8, by the way. That's what that looks like. All right, let me give you guys a little bit of a history lesson. Do you think you know what this is called? This thing right here. If you call it a drive shaft, you'd be mistaken. According to the factory service manual, this is in fact a propeller shaft. So read your factory service manual. There's some things in there that might surprise you. All right, we're going to go ahead and take the drive shaft loose again. All right, your drive shaft's on there with a pretty tight fit, really. There's a little flange that sticks from the drive shaft up into the pinion flange, so need to push it into the transmission slightly and then All right, there we go. See, that's what the strap's for, so you don't drop your drive shaft on the concrete. That factory service manual, there's some smart cookies in there. All right, next thing we're going to do is take the differential cover off and drain the fluid out. All right, we've got a potential to make a huge mess here. Hopefully it won't be too epic. Could have got a bigger pan, I guess. Yeah, the fluid looks good because I swapped it out back in, I forget when. It's 2017, I guess. That's when I did the rear axle bearings. All right, let's go put this someplace safe. All right, before we begin to dismantle the differential and the pinion, we're going to take some measurements. One of the measurements we're going to take is the backlash measurement between the ring gear and the pinion. And basically we're going to take our dial indicator and put it on one of these teeth right here and wiggle this guy back and forth and see what kind of backlash we have between those two gear sets. I think the book said somewhere between 5 and 10 thousandths, but requires that this be stationary. Comically, in the service manual, it shows a guy with a towel wrapped around this, and he's sitting here holding it while he tries to use the dial indicator here and wiggle the gear back and forth. I tried that. It was pretty funny. It just wouldn't work. So what I did was I just bent up a little bracket here and bolted it to the area where the bump stop went, and I used one of the holes in the flange, so that's stationary now. Then I'll take my dial indicator, put it up here, and give it a wiggle test. And let's see, let's just do an auditory. And it seems pretty tight to me. I don't think that's our problem. I think our problem is the pinion bearing itself. I think these gear sets, they look good to me. I don't see any abnormal wear. They're nice and clean. They're nice and sharp. So, again, this is just recording data per the manual. I'm going down through the procedures one by one. Okay, the first measurement to take is with a inch-pound torque wrench. I got one on order. It'll be here today. Rotate the pinion approximately 2 turns in each direction and record the maximum reading obtained. It doesn't actually say here in this particular section, but way back over here on page 447 in the pinion assembly section M, after you've done your overhaul and you're putting everything back together and you're going to tighten down the pinion nut a little bit at a time. We'll go through that procedure later on when we get to it, clearly. If you're installing new bearings, your preload is going to be 22 to 30 inch-pounds. If you're going to reuse the original bearings, which we're not, it's 15 to 20 inch-pounds. So this is the preload of the pinion bearings. You're going to take a torque wrench and put it on the pinion nut right there, and then just turn it like that. And the resistance should be really low, 10, 20, 30 inch-pounds, something like that. I don't know what that is on this car, but we need to measure it before we take this thing down, just as a matter of good practice, to see where our baseline is. Where are we starting from, right? The next measurement we're going to take is the backlash between the ring gear and the pinion gear inside there. So it says right here, if the original pinion and ring gear set is going to be used upon reassembly, and the mileage is greater than 3,000, it is important to reestablish this exact backlash measurement on reassembly. The gear is going to have a natural amount of wear, right? So if you're going to reuse those gears, that natural amount of wear needs to be reincorporated or compensated for when you reassemble the whole differential, and it gives some instructions on what you need to do here. Indicator button on the dial indicator should touch the ring at the heel of a gear. The angle should be at 90 degrees. Good luck on that. Take 3 readings spaced all the way around the ring gear. And then, of course, your reading should fall between 5 and 10 thousandths and should not vary more than 3 thousandths. So let's go do that next. All right, we've got our dial indicator set up here. Magnetized to the body of the diff case, and I've got it set up as best I can with this particular piece of instrumentation. So we are looking at, it's sitting on about 22 there, so almost to 3 when I move it. So it's looking at 7 or 8 thousandths, I would say. Probably closer to 7, not quite to 30, not quite to 22 there. So about 7 in that neighborhood. Our tolerance is 5 to 10. So I'm going to do this a couple more times. I'll just move the wheel, check a couple more times and see if we fall within this particular range in 3 different spots all the way around, and then we'll move on. All right, we got our new digital torque wrench here. Got it off Amazon. I compared it to my Craftsman inch-pound torque wrench, which only goes down to 25 inch-pounds, by the way. Did a comparison, and they seem to match. I used it on a bolt over on the Mercedes, and the 2 wrenches seem to fall in line with one another. All right, in this wrench, the minimum looks like it is 15.9, and I think it starts over, yeah, see, it goes over, it wraps back around. That's 531 inch-pounds. So we go back up, and 15.9 is the lowest inch-pound setting it'll go. I just got it set on 16 there. I wanted to see if there's any preload on this Pinion, and I'm going to guess no, actually. I'm going to guess that is probably a no. Yeah, in other words, Pinion preload does not exist on this Cadillac. So it's a pretty nifty little wrench. A couple more things about this. You can put it in trace mode or peak mode. With the T right there is in trace mode, and it will continually show you the update on the torque range that you're applying to whatever fastener it is. And then, of course, if you put it in P for peak mode, it stops and shows you the peak torque of whatever you're tightening. So I like trace mode because that makes me happy. And then we use this button here to change between inch-pounds and kilograms of force per centimeter, I guess. Yeah, I've actually never used that one. What's next? And of course, good old Newton meters that we're familiar with working on the Mercedes. And the next one being plain old foot-pounds. And back to inch-pounds. This is the power button. And then this is, you can set your target torque rating, and then it'll beep whenever it gets to that setting. And I can grab at 16 inch-pounds. I can grab this with my hand, with one hand, and then pull it with the other, and it'll beep. So this Pinion back here is just, I'm gonna call that no preload whatsoever. Without, I don't think you're supposed to be able to do it like that. So I think our pinion bearing is probably really loose. It might be something as simple as the crush washer inside there. It's just, it's not crushed properly. Maybe the preload was never set correctly. I don't know. We've got to get in there and figure out what's going on with it, though. And that is what we're going to do next. All right, so while we're in our investigation mode here, before we even dismantle this thing, I kept thinking, well, I wasn't thinking, really. I'm like, why do I have 10 holes in my pinion flange? The most recent ones are the ones that don't have any rust down on them, the ones we're using, these guys right here. And then there's another set that have the same setup here and here. So that's 8. And then you have 2 more. And these are basically in the middle of the flange here and here. I'm not sure what's going on. I am thinking maybe somebody tried to fix this years ago and they decided to drill another set of holes. Okay, fine. But what are these 2 sets? What is this set of holes? This is just 2 holes here. And I've been looking at rear axles for these cars on salvage yard websites and looking at photographs. And they don't have 10 holes. So At this point, I'm really considering buying possibly an entire rear axle setup, maybe to get some parts, because you can't really find this part anywhere except a salvage yard, I think. Maybe, and if I get a rear axle, if I run across something, you know, inside here when I tear everything apart and I need a part, then, you know, I'll have it, maybe. At least I will have a replacement pinion flange, which is, I'd kind of like to have that. This 10-hole affair here, that bugs me. So it seems like there's a lot of metal missing from that. So, but that will require a little more thought before I make that decision. All right, the next thing we're going to do is check to see how well the pinion gear and the ring gear mesh together. I don't think we're going to find an issue here, but that involves painting the ring gear and then turning the whole affair and making sure that the gears mesh well with one another. And you're looking for a very specific pattern. Before we do that, we have to remove the pinion housing and separate the two. And then we have to clean up both of the gears really well and get all the oil off of it, because you can't paint with some, you know, with oil on something. And then you reinstall the pinion housing just with like 3 bolts and just tighten it down just a little bit. And then give this thing a turn. And then we're going to analyze the paint markings on the ring gear to see if there's any sort of an issue with how well the gears mesh together. So I went and found a slide hammer that actually works for this pinion flange. So up next, I'm going to go ahead and get the slide hammer on this thing and pull this pinion housing off of the car. I've got all the bolts out except for this one, and it is loosened. Got about a 1/4 inch of play right there, and these bolts are basically what Cadillac calls sliding pins. So I just had some bolts and I cut the heads off of them and screwed them in there. This is basically to ensure that when you pull this, when you separate this from the differential housing, it pulls straight away, you don't damage any parts. So all right, let me get this slide hammer on there and let's see what kind of damage we can do here. Get my hardware. Yeah, that ought to work. This strap is serving a dual purpose today. If you're wondering whether or not this looks inconvenient or troublesome, you would be correct. I really have no idea with how much force that is on there. I could not tell you. We're going to find out though. So here we go. Hey, look at that. Well, that was fairly uneventful, actually. So let's take that bolt off of there. Things just kind of work out when you have the right tools. I went up to the local parts store and borrowed a loaner slide hammer from them, but this part just didn't fit. So you know what? I just broke down and went and bought one because it's high time I had a slide hammer in the house, so in the shop rather. Okay, let's see what kind of damage we can do here. Let's see, will that? Probably not. No, I have no idea how heavy that is. It's pretty heavy. What a lunatic. All right, let me get squared away here. I'll be right back. All right, so I think we have clearly determined why they want you to put these guys here, right? So, so that the whole affair just doesn't plummet downward. Gives you a little bit of tolerance there. So, not a bad idea, actually. So, let me get that slide hammer off of there. We're going to get this pinion housing over on the bench. Okay, we got our pinion housing and pinion gear over here on the workbench. And just from, you know, eyeballing this thing up close for the first time, I don't see any bad wear on the pinion gear itself. The edges are nice and sharp. I don't see indentations, or I don't see pitting. I don't think there's any problem with the way the gear sets were meshing with one another. My opinion is that the problem is down in there, the bearing sets. So you've got an inner and an outer bearing, and then there's a crush sleeve between them. And that crush sleeve has to be, you know, crushed just so to have the proper amount of preload, else things just don't work quite right. This is where I think my problem is. So this is what I've got to take apart. That is going to require, I think, some special tooling. So in the service manual, they have a special mount that they have set up to place this thing in a bench vise, and you put these and you basically bolt it to the mount. So I may be making yet another tool here in the garage. And if we just spin it by hand, you know, it doesn't sound horrible or anything. But really, there's no way to know unless we take this whole thing apart. But before we do that, we've got to check the meshing. We've got to check how well these gears mesh with one another. So got to go ahead and clean this up, clean up the ring gear, and put some paint on the ring gear, reinstall this, turn them around, and we'll check our patterns. All right, I'm sparing you what Cold War motors up in Canada calls work. I'm done cleaning up the gear, the ring gear, and the differential with just some brake clean. And I've been working on the pinion side over here as well. And this plastic works pretty well to keep messes down. So I've got that cleaned up pretty well. I think I'm getting ready to reinstall this. But before we do that, let's paint the ring gear. All right, it's time to mark our ring gear. We got Permatex non-drawing Prussian blue, part number 80038. Nobody has the yellow stuff. There's a yellow gear marking compound, but no one around here has it. Since I'm not a gear specialist or machinist or, you know, that kind of thing, I don't really know where to get that type of thing, except for, you know, Amazon or whatever, and I don't want to wait. I did find this stuff at the O'Reilly Distribution Center north of here. They usually have pretty much everything, and they were keeping this stuff in the back. It was not out on the regular aisle along with the rest of the Permatex products. I don't know why. And it didn't even come in a package. He just put these two tubes on the counter, and I looked at him and I said, "What's up with this? There's not even a package?" He goes, "Nope, that's the way they send it to us." I'm like, okay, that's pretty weird. I guess maybe it's used so often by maybe transmission rebuilders or something that, you know, they just get it in loose like that, and it just goes out the door just as quick as it came in. All right, let me paint these teeth, and I'll be back just shortly. Oh, and by the way, don't laugh about the hard hat. I've already cracked my skull on that trailing arm right there a couple of times. I decided that I didn't want that to happen again, so because I'm too scatterbrained to duck. I'm going to finish my painting. I'll have to keep in mind this is not crown molding, and it doesn't have to be pretty, but I can't seem to help myself. We'll be back in a few minutes. All right, the all-knowing, all-seeing service manual says, Simon says, to put a little pressure on the pinion as you turn the ring gear to, I guess, more readily facilitate the meshing of the gears together. So let's do that. Before we do that, let me mark the gear so that I know that I've gone all the way around. A little white paint marker there. And so let's All right, let's go back the other way. That's difficult to do with a little bit of pressure on it, I guarantee it. Okay. Now, let's see if we can read the tea leaves, as it were. I'm going to do some up-close inspection, and I'll be back momentarily. All right, let's take a look at the drive side of the gears first. So what you want is for your pattern or your witness mark to reside as close to the center of the face of the gear as possible, right? And you don't want it to be too low and too high and all that kind of stuff. Now, I will say that it appears to be touching all the way across, but with the heaviest engagement just left of center here. And there is a distinctive blue line between the tip of the gear, the top of the gear, downward, say maybe about 1/8 of an inch. And then it doesn't go all the way out to the end. It stops just shy of getting to the end. There's about 1/16, maybe 1/8 of blue left over. It doesn't go all the way down into the trough either. Kind of hard to see there. But there's a distinctive line across the bottom. It doesn't go all the way into the trough, and it doesn't go all the way to the top. I think the pattern is pretty good. Am I an expert? By no means whatsoever. So you guys comment on this and let me know. I've got to do a little more research on the old confuser inside, and I'll be able to make a determination as to whether or not, what I'm seeing is pretty good or not. Disregard that little speck of white paint. I initially used the white paint pen to paint the gears, but it dried hard, and mostly because I had never done it before, and I didn't know the proper type of paint to use. So I had to get the brake clean on there and clean the gears off. It was pretty funny. I felt pretty foolish. And I called Napa, and they said, "Oh, you need the Prussian Blue by Permatex. That's the good stuff." Oh, okay. Well, then, give me some then. All right. Well, anyway, let's look at the coast side next. The coast side has a really nice, what appears to me anyway, even distribution all the way across the tooth, and it goes to the inside over here. And I would have to say that it goes all the way over to the inside on the coast side. So I'm not sure about that. Maybe there's an adjustment that needs to be made. I'm not sure. It doesn't go all the way to the top, doesn't go all the way to the bottom, and doesn't go all the way to the outside either, but it seems to be mostly towards the inside. So, all right, there you go. I'm going to have to do a little more research, and we'll make a determination to see whether or not our contact patterns are good to go, or if we need to make some changes to move the contact pattern in or out and try to optimize that as best we can. We've got a lot more work to do. Well, I think that's going to do it for this video, folks. It took me a long time today to run around town and grab the correct slide hammer to get that pinion off of the differential housing, so that took quite a while. I borrowed one from O'Reilly, but it just wouldn't work, so I broke down and just went and bought one from Hobo Freight. Tried the wrong kind of gear paint to mark the gears. I had to wipe it completely off again. That was a lot of fun. And but once I got the right stuff, the Permatex Prussian Blue, that worked out really well. One of the things that the Cadillac service manual says is to use guide pins to guide the pinion flange as you remove it and install it. So I just basically found some longer bolts. I cut the heads off of those, and that worked out really, really well. So I've got a lot more work ahead of me, and it took pretty much all day just to get all of this stuff squared away to where I can get, get this thing almost disassembled and get the gears marked. So our focus now is going to be on disassembling the pinion, because I think the bearings inside the pinion are a little bit wonky. I'm not sure yet, but we know the preload was basically non-existent, so we've just got to take it apart to find out. And the way you do that is you use a bench vise, and the way you do that is you have to mount the whole pinion assembly on this special mount and shove it in the vise so that it can turn. You can use dial gauges on it and take it apart properly according to according to Well, according to the proper procedure. So what does that mean? That means tomorrow we get to make some tools. So stick around for that. There's going to be more welding and more grinding and more cutting. I appreciate you guys stopping by the channel. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. And if you'd like to be notified whenever I release a new video, don't forget to click that little bell down below. You know where it is. You guys have a good one, and remember to enjoy restoring your classic Cadillac.